Salutations, friends. Aloha. This is Gemini Brett. I'm very honored to be here at EA Zoom meetings once again. What a treat, this incredible free sharing of the astrological gnosis online. So thanks to all of you at EA for everything you do, and it's my honor to be here. Let's see. It's a good thing when we speak with the non-astrological or friends who are new to this language, right? To warn them that not every word we say will probably register in the conscious mind, and that when it's that way, to just sink into the heart and the feeling of the thing. And I say that now, even though I'm speaking as I know to a whole bunch of astrologers, because today I'm also going to be speaking in the language of music some. And I know that some of us have studied music and some of us have not, and some of us play music without knowing the theory, and that's a wonderful thing. You know, this is there's so many wonderful metaphors between the craft of musicianship and the craft of astrology. And really it might be much more than a metaphor. So I'm going to play just a little bit more and ask us to kind of just sink in and know that there's going to be a lot of intellectual stimulation happening today, but if we stay in our body, stay in our heart, and heart before chart in many ways, we'll all make it through. Hearing the aspects. This is a bit of a quadrivium work from a long-standing thing I've been after, which I call the way of the 7 rays. This number 7 is so magical in our craft. Traditionally, as we know, 7 wanderers, the luminaries, sun and moon, and Mercury, Venus, Mars, Jupiter, Saturn, 2, the 7 visible moving lights. And there's wonderful ways that we can arrange these 7s in different heptagrams and different orders. And in the upper left, you see a heptagon, a 7-pointed figure, and moving from the moon around clockwise, it moves through the Chaldean order, or the order of planetary speed: moon, Mercury, Venus, Sun, Mars, Jupiter, Saturn. On the right, in what in the geometry tradition we call a, what would that one be? That's a skip 2 heptagram, where when you're drawing from one point of the 7-pointed star and skipping 2 to draw your line. So we can go from there and trace the 7 days of the week, from the moon Monday to Mars, Tuesday to Mercury, Wednesday, and Jupiter, Venus, Saturn, Sun, Moon, right? And the lower left, it's a skip 1 heptagram, or 7-pointed star. And we see there the increasing atomic numbers of the metals alchemically associated with these 7 visible planets. Isn't that a trip, right? So we get into these systems, and especially as I've been playing more and more with geometry and the music correlation, I'm finding so much about the ancient wisdom that's just deeply embedded into the imagery of our craft. So this is a new image of very old wisdom that I co-created with my dear one, Anna Zaharia, for our collective called Arts of the Chart. And it's a look at what the 12-sign zodiac is. And, you know, there's this great question of why are there 12 signs? Historically, it said it has to do with the Babylonian luni-solar calendar that predated the sidereal and then the tropical zodiac. And that may be true, but I think there's something much more mystical about the 12, and that, as I like to say, creation creates in 12. So I just want to play a short thing where we can listen and see that creation in process. In this geometry of 12 signs, you actually see the 36 deacons here as well in the background, but we see the Taji, which many of us think of as the yin and the yang, showing in a sense the 6 signs above the horizon, daytime, and 6 below, nighttime, and then also 6 petals of silver and 6 petals of gold, something I'll get back into. But when we study the formation of the zodiac in this way, this is actually where it begins in some senses, the Vesica Piscis, the mandorla, the sacred almond. This is my logo with Anna. But this incredible ancient symbol, it's much more than a symbol. This is known often as the seed of life. And what it is 6 circles stitched around one center circle, all of the same radius. And so 7 circles make a 12-sided figure. It's really 2 6s. So in the original circle, which is the middle circle here, you can see a 6-petaled flower on the inside and a 6-petaled flower on the outside, and they're phased by 30 degrees. This is the birth of the tropical zodiac and of many other sacred 12s. So 12s and 7s, these are very important numbers in our tradition. And I would say that both where we find 12 here in the geometry tradition and 12 here in the harmony tradition, we're finding really truthfully actually mathematical, but natural mathematical, nature's math, number magic systems that show us that creation creates in 12s, right? So these cats didn't get that memo. And I'm sure you've seen this thing showing its ugly head every now and then, this idea that there's a 13th zodiac sign, and Cosmo referring to this Space Place NASA page for kids where they're making sure the kids know that astrology is not science and it's about reading fantasy stories. And it's a pretty tough article. I highly recommend you go check out that page. But just in short, basically they're saying that of the 12 constellations of the zodiac, because NASA, at least those who wrote this article for the kids, believe that our zodiac is constellational. Yeah, and that's not true for tropical astrologers. I hope you know that. It's actually not true for sidereal astrologers either. The very right of this image is the great star Spica, the shaft of wheat that the priestess of the heavens holds. The constellation I call priestess to differentiate signs and constellations. They are different things. And anyway, the priestess, the astronomers call the constellation Virgo. And that star Spica is in most of the sidereal traditions, the star that is used to define the sidereal zodiac, and beginning with that star at 0 Libra. But it's in the constellation Virgo. Right? I mean, the constellations are not equal in size, and NASA makes this point, and many academics do. And they're saying that there needs to be this 13th sign, Ophiuchus, right? Ophiuchus. the serpentender. But, you know, I'll direct your gaze to the center of the screen. We'll see the galactic center. And just to the right, a very bright star, the heart of the scorpion, Antares. Yeah, one of the royal stars, the Bahamian stars, Bedouin stars, right? And marker stars of the heavens. And if you've engaged with Antares physically, it's not happening today, because today, almost right now, there's a new moon in tropical Sagittarius, very close to that star. That star in the tropical zodiac in our day and age is 10 degrees tropical Sagittarius, very close to where today's new moon is, around 15th degree of Sagittarius. Tropical, all right? It's sidereal, constellational. We have all these zodiacs, and it's a trip. You know, I'm writing an article about this for OPA right now. So it's something I've been considering, but you know, it's interesting that in NASA's like new 13 sign zodiac that they're suggesting, and also just attacking astrology in the process, they don't include Antares as an ecliptic star, as a zodiacal star. These are the boundaries that NASA is using for their new zodiac math, all right? These boundaries of the constellations were determined in 1929 by the International Astronomical Union. And there are now officially 88 constellations, which is interesting because there's 88 keys on a grand piano. This is not one. 88 days in Mercury's orbit of the sun, 88 Earth days anyway. But, you know, these cats, when they carved up the sky to pick where constellations are and are not, decided that this royal star, Antares, which is only about 5 degrees in latitude from the ecliptic plane, somehow does not belong to the zodiac. And they gave that section of the heavens to Ophiuchus and say that the serpentender is this zodiacal constellation. I didn't really plan to spend so much time on this today, but you know, it's because it's important. This is important for us to know. It's important for us to know that constellations and signs are different things. And this is a beautiful and a powerful constellation, as they all are, you know, but it is not a zodiacal constellation. And to suggest that this area of space just above Antares here belongs to Ophiuchus and not Scorpius is so incredibly absurd when Ophiuchus has no stars there. It almost feels like it was a seed planted many decades ago that wished to sprout in an academic attack of astrological gnosis. And it's in so many ways because the academics, you know, who are searching for answers in matter and looking for the how versus, you know, many of us are asking the why and searching for answers in spirit, right? And we want to do both. And so, you know, one of my great passions is to bring astronomy back to the astrologers, to make sure that we keep our feet on the ground as we're searching, you know, in the why space, in the spiritual path. But I love the opportunity to educate the astronomers as well. And unfortunately, we've lost our traditional way, at least in the mystery schools of education, which were in the Quadrivium. And, you know, if the academics hadn't seen those number sciences as nonsense, then they would know that creation creates in 12s. Because again, this shows in harmony. This shows in geometry. This shows in what the Greeks called arithmetic. Though I like to use this term number magic for that side of the Quadrivium. So here's one who most likely practiced in these sacred arts, absolutely, Pythagoras. There is geometry in the humming of the strings. There is music in the spacing of the spheres. It's from Edgar Casey. The cosmos was formed according to and upon the basis of laws, which are expressed as music, arithmetic, and geometry. They bring about harmony, order, and balance. So these words like arithmetic tend to scare people these days, right? Because we have these memories of the programming of our scholastic shenanigans. And so usually when I speak about what the Greeks referred to as arithmetic, I speak about what really feels more true to the tradition, which is number magic or number in nature. And the Quadrivium, these old sciences, it said that these are what we would study as star students before we gained access to the astrological gnosis, that we would have to know the magic of number. And so one was arithmetic, but it's not like adding and subtracting as we think of arithmetic today. One, geometry, which we call geometry, and that's number in space. Another, musical harmony, number in time. And then astronomy, which is number in space and time. And this opens the gateway to the highest of the lower mysteries, which was known as astrology. And what's above that? Well, we are on a quest to find this, you and I. All right, if you learn music, you'll learn history. If you learn music, you'll learn mathematics. If you learn music, you'll learn most of all there is to learn, as said by the sleeping prophet Edgar Cayce, most likely when he was awake. Where words fail, music speaks. Hans Christian Andersen. You know, sometimes I'm sitting in a consultation these days and I'll speak about someone's like, you know, T-square and their chart, and it's not really landing, and we're trying to get after this in many ways. And then I'll break out this melodica and just play and watch this thing happen together in our bodies. And it's like the story presents itself just because we heard that aspect, that astrological aspect from the native soul song, from their chart, and we listened and we tuned into that and we felt it in our bodies sensually, you know. Sensuously, sentiently, in this combination of the two. All right, so this might be totally alien to you, right? The keyboard, and it's a strange thing, this arrangement of the white and the black keys, but we're gonna take a peek into this today and correlate it to the astrological signs. All right, so this is one thing we'll hear often in the keyboard. This is called the major scale. You've all heard that before, do, re, mi, yeah. So the white keys on the piano are called the C major scale, and they increase from C to C just like that. So we'll often relate them to numbers: the first, the second, the third, the fourth, the fifth, the sixth, and the seventh of what we call a major scale or a diatonic scale. All right, Greek words. And then the eighth, but the eighth is the octave. All right, so like I'll play C here and here. So 8 really is like 1 again. Let's call it 1 prime. All right. So really there's these 7 notes in that do, re, mi, fa, sol, la, ti. Right? The next do is an octave up of the previous do. You know, it's like we could say in a sense like Aries returning to Aries, or I'll call it Cancer to returning to Cancer, and I'll say more about that in a second. All right. So you'll see that there's also these 5 black keys within a musical octave between, in this case, one C and the next C. This would be a more musical, you know, theoretical way to write this. You say the 1, and between the first and the second is the flat second. It's the second note of the scale. And just we take it down, what's called a half step, or I'll say a sign. All right, but undoubtedly, we don't want to get too technical here. Undoubtedly, there are 7 of these white keys and 5 of these black keys in a musical octave. And what's 7 plus 5 but 12, right? So this is called the chromatic scale. And here's the octave. So there's 12 of these, what we call half steps in a musical octave. And, you know, there are many different scales throughout the world, right? I mean, like when the Indian musicians play traditional Indian music, there's a whole lot more than 12 notes in that same amount of space. But this is a very mathematical thing. We'll explore that a little bit today, not too much, right? We don't want to lose our minds. But 12 and 12, right? So the 12 that you and I know very well, and everybody listening to this thing, I'm sure, since it's being presented by EA Zoom meetings in astrology, right, are the 12 signs of the zodiac. And so, you know, I map the 12 half steps within a musical octave to the 12 signs of the zodiac. And I like to start at C with Cancer. I mean, maybe it's just because I speak English where Cancer begins with C. Maybe not. You'll notice here that's a kind of interesting arrangement of the signs. From if we go counterclockwise, as we're used to, from what we might think of as the midheaven, just seeing this with Cancer there up at the top. Cancer, Sag, Taurus, Libra, Pisces, Leo, what's going on? And do you know what that arrangement of the zodiac is? Just looking naturally, like what is the astrological aspect between Cancer and Sag? Pose that to you. You'll find all sorts of zodiac music maps online. And some of them, you know, this is me writing what? I personally just don't get this. And it might be because I'm not hip enough yet in astrology or music, or I have no idea. But running from minor scales for some of the signs and major scales for some of the signs. And if you know about music, you can convert those minors to the relative major and vice versa. And you'll find that there's no symmetry here. Where certainly we know that the zodiac is symmetrical, right? 12 signs of 30 degrees, whether you're working with a tropical zodiac or a sidereal zodiac, that's the trip. So this is one that's been going around a lot lately. And I don't know who created it. The URL down there for where I found it online today, I wrote, but it's really off balance. You know, somebody created this maybe because they feel that Aquarius feels like the key A and that Capricorn feels like the key G. And that's cool, you know. I mean, actually what's happening is if you go to Virgo on the lower right there, you'll see around counterclockwise C, D, E, F, G, A, B. All right, so those are those 7 notes that we just looked at, do, re, mi, fa, sol, la, ti. But then it just jumps to D flat. And what happens is the aspects between signs, like a trine, is not always going to work the same harmonically. And so this is in like stark disagreement with astrological wisdom and astrological gnosis. And I'll say the same thing of musical harmony. So, you know, this one's here's an older image that I'm really having a hard time decoding, although I'll probably spend more time with this and maybe get out of a monochord and play and see if I can decode this harmony of the heavenly spheres. And by the way, that was the subtitle or the title of this talk, with the subtitle being Hearing the Aspects. And I'm not meaning to address the harmony of the heavenly spheres a la, you know, Kepler or Pythagoras, but rather playing the aspects, listening to the aspects. There's another map I found online. You can see the link there at the bottom of the page. And this was configured a little bit to like a Chinese scale, and I'm fascinated by it now. I'm sure I'll check it out for some time. This is one that is aligned, if you know music, to what's called the circle of fifths, moving from, it looks like they placed Capricorn at C, and then the next sign Aquarius at G and D, and we'll look at that a little bit. And some have suggested that this is an old esoteric and maybe even Rosicrucian system of the music astro map. This is the same concept, and I don't want to spend too much time here, but this is connecting the astrological signs through what's called the circle of fifths in music. I'll leave that at that for right now. This, however, is what's called a chromatic map. And this is the map, at least the technique that I prefer, the modality of mapping the signs chromatically, but this is not how I do it. In this map, Aries is placed at the note C, and then you just climb through the notes sequentially with the sign. So C goes to C sharp and then D, and that's Aries, Taurus, Gemini. This is how I first came across the astro-music correlation via my friend Ezra Sanzerbel, who wrote this really cool book, Astro-Music. Check out Ezra. His website is here, audiomancy.net. And this is an image of the front of his webpage. And with this map, you'll see at the very top here, Aries, and it's configured as C. And then you see Pluto, which is interesting, and Mars. We see Jupiter with Aquarius and Moon with Sagittarius. It's very like strange things. If you've studied in the esoteric realms, you'll probably also know that this is an image from not even just the Rosicrucians. You can see the rose there, right, and the rosy cross in the center. But as it came through Crowley in the OTO, and it's not just my own personal questions around the Crowley in general, but I just don't feel like Aries is the chord C or the scale C or the key C, because Aries, which I do feel very Martian, of course, should have some sharps. And the whole idea of the key of C in music is there's no sharps or no flats. That's why it's all the white keys on the keyboard. And so I apply a very similar system, but I map the sign of Cancer to the key of C. And that makes Aries A. And this seems perhaps to register with some other esoteric traditions. I'll just leave that there. And maybe even with the Thema Mundi, which is kind of the oldest layout of the signs, reaching back into the Hellenistic astrological tradition, at least of the Western signs, right? So we're used to seeing Aries at the ascendant in what we call the natural zodiac, or some call the zero Aries zodiac. But in the Thema Mundi, it's Cancer over there, and the moon. And so I put Cancer at the key of C. And this is a chromatic map, so I'll go through here and then I'll leave it up if you want to take a screenshot and just play with this. So the idea is Cancer, and then just going sequentially through the zodiac up to from C to C sharp or D flat, and that's Leo, and to D, Virgo, and E flat or D sharp, Libra, like this, okay? So I can leave this here. Maybe you want to take a screenshot. This is how I personally map the zodiac to a chromatic musical scale in the Western octave. And you know what's cool about this, I mean, say you have moon in Scorpio and it's reflecting Capricorn sunlight, right? And so we know that's a sextile, and so I can just play Scorpio and Capricorn. Or maybe that Scorpio moon is reflecting Aquarius light, square. Or Pisces light, the trine. You can hear that, right? Trine, square. Trine, square. And doesn't that sound like what we learn about these astrological aspects? So it's cool to hear this in our body. It's cool to feel it in the body. You know, I always suggest this when the moon waxes away from new moon today, you know, and you see that sliver crescent, and you can feel the semi-sextile in your body if you point one hand to the setting sun and one hand to that crescent moon that's just appearing. And as the moon waxes, you know, since they get to the waxing half moon, the first quarter moon, you point a hand of the moon and a hand of the sun, and you'll feel the square in your body. And later the waxing gibbous, you'll feel that trine, you know, at the full moon time. Feel that opposition. It's a really beautiful thing to bring our body, which holds the heart, right, into our astrological gnosis. And so we're not just doing this in the head. Some systems, like Ezra's system, assigns notes also to the planets. My feeling is that that's not really the shape of the thing, you know, in my cosmology, and I don't mean this really just metaphorically, but very much literally, the signs are emanating from the heart of our planet outward, and they're aligned to the cardinal directions of Earth, which is born itself of our spin, the primary motion. The tropical zodiac is absolutely a directional thing. It's a shamanic system. So these signs are heading out to space. It's like a 12-panel Simon game, if you know that game where you have to play the red and the blue and the yellow and the green things, but there's 12 of them, right? And so these planets are like instruments. They each have their own specific timbre and tone. I mean, I can play this note here on a melodica and then play the same note on an alto saxophone. And it's a very different experience. Right? Well, Venus and Pluto are very different experiences. And so it's as if these many instruments, these wonderful planets, you know, are playing the notes of the sign in which they reside, making this amazing celestial chord of the moment now. Well, that chord resonates in the heart of Earth, in the heart of our planet. That's where we measure astrology from, you know, not from the surface where we can see the heavenly happenings. Yeah. We measure from the surface of our center of our planet. And I love that, you know, it's something I say often. If you, everywhere you are right now, you are listening live or later, reach your hands to the top of the sky. And, you know, chances are you're pointing to a different star than I am. But if we draw a line down through our spine, we will all meet in the center of planet Earth, Gaia, her heart. That's where we measure astrology from. Truly, as below, so above. We're measuring the energies of the above from the below. That is the whole. And the particular is the surface, just like, you know, the culture where I am here in California is going to be different than it is in Australia. And, you know, the quality of light at this time when I'm speaking right now, very different as well. The surface is different. And the surface shows up as the houses, right? You can relocate your birth chart anywhere in the world, and it's going to keep the same aspects. The planets are going to be in exact same degrees of the same signs and in relationship to one another. Your geometry is the same for the moment called you. But as you relocate, you know, that moment around the earth, we'll see that where that geometry is in the houses will shift, yeah? And I mean, just imagine being surrounded by musicians playing this chord. Well, that sounds different if you're facing the trumpet player than it does if you're facing the flute player, right? So that's kind of my idea, I guess, in this musical metaphor of signs and houses. And again, I feel like it's so much more than a metaphor. Actually, as I'm exploring astrology more and more through music and music more and more through astrology, I have a feeling I'm getting after something that I need to learn. I don't exactly know what it is yet. All right. So this is the map that I use. You can see the signs aligned to these different keys. If you know the keyboard, here they are, right? Cancer is C on the left. And the top of that octave B is Gemini on the right. And here it is with some of the key signatures. And this is what's called the circle of fifths in music, or the circle of fourths, okay? So let me go back here, and we'll start with C, which is Cancer on the left. Really, I should go back to that page where I drew the notes. So let me just actually do this, hold on. Right. So C. And I'm gonna just play this. Do, re, mi, fa, sol. All right, that's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. All right, so we consider that musically. That wouldn't be like the first to the fifth sign, by the way. We'll look at that in a second. But in music, with what's called a diatonic or the major scale, we'll call it the first note and the second, third, and fourth, and fifth notes of the scale, okay? So the fourth note of that from C is F, and from the fifth note is G. So what you'll see in this arrangement of the 12 musical keys is moving from C to F in this counterclockwise direction that we astrologers are so used to, the secondary motion. That's moving through the fourths. F is the fourth of C. B flat is the fourth of F. E flat is the fourth of B flat. A flat is the fourth of E flat. And now we'll go from C at the top again in the clockwise direction. All right, so from C to G, G is the fifth of C. D is the fifth of G. A is the fifth of D. E is the fifth of A. And why we as musicians arrange the keys in this way is it shows the keys that are most related to one another. Okay, so C has no sharps and no flats. And if you're hip to key signatures, that's what's being shown under the letter C there, which is under the sign of Cancer. An empty bar, no flats or no sharps. As you gain or increase by fifths, okay, so we'll go clockwise. So from C to G to D, or from Cancer to Aquarius to Virgo, quincunx, quincunx. You'll see adding one sharp, which looks like the pound sign, or what in modern times you might call the hashtag, right? So C has no sharps, G has 1, D has 2, A has 3, E has 4, etc. Okay. If we go in the other direction from C to F to B flat by fourths, increasing by fourths, what you'll see is that you add a flat, or you subtract a sharp. Okay, so from C to F, we go from no flats to 1 flat, from F to B flat, from 1 flat to 2 flats, etc. A G flat at the bottom, Capricorn, is many flats, or it's 6 to be specific. Or I could also call G flat this note F sharp. And while G flat has 6 flats, F sharp has 6 sharps. And it's the most in a way, opposite thing of no flats and no sharps, which is Cancer. Well, Capricorn opposite Cancer, obviously, right? So we're getting more technically musical than I mean to here, so I'll just leave that there. But these are images that you could take screenshots of if you'd like. And again, you know, this is the map that I use. It's a chromatic map that fits the sign Cancer at the note C, and shown here chromatically, and shown here through the cycle of fifths in one direction, or the cycle of fourths in another direction, which we will find is the quincunx map. All right, penta. So the pentatonic scale, where, you know, let me play an instrument that I'm more familiar with. Where have you heard this before? So I don't mean that exact song, right? That's just coming out of the moment now. But I mean this arrangement of notes. You hear a lot of songs like that. What's one that will be played pretty soon? Right. Auld Lang Syne, right? Scotland. I mean, songs from China, the Native American flute, right, in this pentatonic key. And so I draw the pentagram, and yet it's kind of off. All right, so the way that these particular notes, and this is a key if you're just playing keyboard for this first time, if you want to build beautiful melodies, just play the black keys. You kind of can't go wrong unless you accidentally hit a white key like I just did, and you heard that and you're like, oh, right? Because you heard a semi-sextile. Anyway, we'll get back to that. But the black keys of the keyboard, there's 5 of them, right? It's a pentatonic scale. And the scale is like, I mean, age old. I'm talking like Babylonian instruments that we have discovered. It's maybe as old as the astrological tradition. And it's all over the globe, throughout culture, throughout time. And so we can draw this pentagram, right? Kind of. So this is where we're going to look at a different shape and talk about this idea of why I'm showing now the zodiac instead of a circle as we're used to seeing it, right? As this dodecagon, 12-sided figure. Because in our tradition, the the traditional aspects, which we often call these days the major aspects or the Ptolemaic aspects, they're based on whole sign astrology, right? And this means that they are all going to connect a whole sign to a whole sign. And that means, like, when you look at a pentagram, which is 72 arc degrees between the points of a regular pentagram. That's just 360 degrees divided by 5, 72, right? And we call it the quintile, right? Well, the quintile is not going to land like from 0 Gemini to 0 Leo, right? Or from 0 Taurus to 0 Leo, I should say, what's showing up here, right? You have to be in 30-degree multiples for whole sign aspects. And this is the root of our tradition. This is not me saying that the so-called minor aspects are minor. Actually, they're not minor musically, and they're not minor energetically, and they're incredible things. And actually, my quest into the so-called minor aspects like the quintile, septile, novile, etc., has led me into, well, why traditionally did they say there were only 7 and there were these 7 rays? All right, so we're going to look at this. Here's that G flat or F sharp Capricorn, and Pisces at, I'm going to speak in flats, Pisces at A flat, Taurus at B flat, Leo at D flat, and Libra at E flat. And let me rewind again, and I'm looking at the keys up top, but let's also draw the aspects. From Capricorn to Pisces is a sextile, yeah? From Pisces to Taurus is a sextile. But from Taurus to Leo is a square. And I think you can see on the keyboard here how we took more space to go from Taurus or B flat to Leo, D flat, than we did from Capricorn to Pisces or Pisces to Taurus, right? Sextiles and squares. You can just count the amount of notes too. From Capricorn to Pisces, I go from Capricorn to that white key between them and then Pisces. It's 2 half steps. Same thing from Pisces to Taurus. But to get from Taurus to Leo, I'm going white, white, black. You see, 3, yeah. Sextile, sextile, square, sextile to Libra. And so we don't get a shape like that perfect pentagram. If we're speaking about moving from like 0 degree of a sign to the next, or 15th degree, maybe the middles of the signs, right? We actually get this shape, which is a shape of 5 quincunxes. Quincunx means 5/12, right? So 5/12 of the way around the circle is the quincunx. It's the cycle of fifths, actually, applied astrologically. So the fifth of F sharp, or G flat, where for me is Capricorn, is D flat, or C sharp. And that's Leo. So I'll say F sharp and C sharp, or G flat and D flat. If you speak music, you'll know they're the same thing. And if you know that, you're wrong, depending on temperament. And that's a whole nother story. And it's not the kind of temperament that we study in astrology. And I'm kind of wishing I could just erase the last 5 seconds. Anyway, the fifth, I'm just going to speak this time in sharps. This fifth of C sharp, Leo, is G sharp, Pisces. The fifth of G sharp, Pisces, is E flat. G sharp, D sharp, Libra. And the fifth of D sharp, Libra, is is A sharp, Taurus, which might be hidden behind my camera, but it's the last of the 3 black keys on the upper right. So this is actually how we are constructing what looks here just like a pentagram, and we have them all bunched together. Pythagoras, and it's said to be really the oldest science ever done, was playing with taking a string, a vibrating string, right? On a lyre, you made the monochord, which is just a 1-string thing, and then dividing that string in certain places in its length. When you divide the string in half, you get the octave. It's pretty cool. You cut the string in half, and you get double the frequency. And he's playing with different places. What happens if I cut it in 3/4 along the way? And when I say cut, I don't mean cut it with scissors, but just put a finger down and pluck it, right? Like you're playing a guitar. When you play 2/3 along the way, you get the musical fifth. And our ears like this. Right? And so we find there's a lot of consonants and good feelings with an octave and with the fifth. And I should say that's a musical fifth, not a fifth sign. Yeah. And so Pythagoras actually constructed the musical octave that way. It takes many octaves to do it. But as we showed here, moving up by fifths, right? So let me just play this. I'll light them up and then play this. You can hear how I'm moving up by the same harmonic relationship, right? Harmony is relationship. Aspect is relationship. So I can take this and just keep going, right? The fifth of B flat Taurus is F Sagittarius. The fifth of F Sagittarius is C Cancer. The fifth of C Cancer is G Aquarius. The fifth of G is D Virgo. The fifth of D is A Aries. The fifth of A is E Scorpio. The fifth of E is B Gemini. And the fifth of Gemini, or B, is Capricorn. Back to F sharp where we started. So I'm going to rewind this all the way And we'll just see it build up again, all right? From Capricorn to Leo is the quincunx, right? So look at this star that's being drawn, which is called the dodecagram, the regular 12-pointed star, which in so many ways is at the root of our zodiac. And one thing that just absolutely fascinates me is if I build by fifths like this, like Pythagoras did, and it takes me 7 octaves to get from, in this case, Capricorn back to Capricorn. It would take me 7 octaves to get from Aries back to Aries, wherever I start. And we see this intermingling again of these sacred astrological numbers, the 12, the 7, and the 5. And this amazing shape, this dodecagram, the dodecagon, or you might have played with the Platonic solids and gotten to the dodecahedron, which is a 12-sided 3-dimensional figure, 12 5-sided, well, 12 pentagons, right? So 12 pentagons make a dodecahedron, which it's rumored the Pythagoreans said was the shape of Earth and the cosmos and of the energy of the ether. So Pythagorean tuning is really a beautiful thing in some senses because it shows this spiral. And it's something I play with a lot astrologically, you know, like from this Sagittarius new moon today, December 6th, 2018, we'll go on to a Capricorn new moon and then an Aquarius new moon and then a Aquarius new moon. Do we have 2 next year? I can't remember which one we have 2 of. We have 2 full moons. Anyway, sometimes you'll get 2 new moons in a row, right? But anyway, we will get back through the zodiac to Sagittarius, and it will be in a different degree, and it's a different vibe. The whole chord is a different thing, you know? Are we getting back to Sagittarius, or are we like leveling up? If you've studied your cycles and you know about the Metonic cycle of 19 solar years, which equals 235 lunations, you know, 19 years from today, we will have a new moon basically in these same degrees of Sagittarius. But is it still there? Can you step in the same river twice? Obviously, the other planets are in different tempos, you know, different cycles. And our Earth, along with our stars, moving through space, right? So really, there is this kind of spiraling motion happening. Now, if you play with this mathematically, and I don't want to do too much of this, but just like taking 3 halves of a frequency to get to the next fifth, by the time you get back to the octave, which should be twice the frequency of the note from which you began, it doesn't line up. And let's leave that there. But I will say, if you want to pursue this line of thought, check out Pythagorean tuning or check out equal temperament or musical temperament online. There's a lot for us astrologers to learn in this way. I truly believe. And music is a great interface to expand our gnosis of the astrological wisdom. All right. Okay, yeah. So dodecagons, dodecagrams. All right, a gon is the shape, gram is the star. And so let's play with this geometrically. It's something you and I are much more familiar with. We'll review aspects a little bit, you know, in the way that we learn them. All right, so again, this Anna and I created, which is just the seed of life, right? 6 circles around 1, 7 circles to make a 12-sign zodiac of 6 and 6. You see the 6 silver inside. I think of the inner sides as the chalice signs, the water and the earth signs, right? And the outer signs, the gold signs here, is the air and the fire, the blade signs, right? Before the 4 elements, there's up and there's down, or in and out, right? And that's symbolized here. And this is a beautiful thing. If you learn how to draw the seed of life, and I highly recommend you do, it will teach you astrology, your astrology. After you construct the seed of life, draw a circle that's tangent to the outer circles, and you will see the Taji show up, the beautiful thing. So again, this symbol is showing us kind of the 6 inner signs, the 6 outer signs, the polarity, and showing us a representative as well as the quality of light in the houses above the horizon and below the horizon. We even see that light start showing itself before the sun rises, if you look to the left as the ascendant. All right, so back to this idea of the way of 7 rays. This is actually maybe a more appropriate symbol, and one that I've been using, because the idea is that it speaks about the traditional aspects, the Ptolemaic aspects, or the major aspects as we call them. Here shown from Cancer, here shown from Aries. All right, and so what are they? We have our 2 sextiles, we have our 2 squares, we have our 2 trines, and then our opposition, okay? So traditionally speaking, these are the 7 aspects. Each sign sees 7 other signs, and that's it. The other 4, the grayed out ones here, so from Aries, and actually, in fact, also from Libra, Pisces, Taurus, Virgo, and Scorpio were said to be blind spots, in-conjuncts, aversions, and all sorts of interesting things. That's really made me wonder. And just so you can hear an inversion, aversion, in-conjunct. Sounds pretty averse, right? Well, this is one too. And this is one too. And I think those sound incredibly beautiful. So that's where the music map at first seemed to fail me. And as I engaged deeper and deeper with it, I got to learn a whole lot about astrology. Conjunction, we tend to consider one of the major aspects. To the ancients, that was not an aspect at all. An aspect literally means to see. In a conjunction, you're not seeing each other, you're looking from the same place. So planets that are conjunct, as we call it today, in the same sign, I mean by that, right? So let me rewind and just say too that from the ancient cosmology, this is sign to sign. It's not about orbs. Aries and Capricorn are square. Whether if it's 0 Aries and 29.5 Capricorn, which is actually a whole lot more geometrically like a sextile, that's considered square. The planets see one another because they're in signs that either see one another or don't see one another because they're in signs that don't see one another. So the idea of planets in the same sign were known as cohabiting. So these are the 4 traditional aspects, the Ptolemaic aspects, right? The diameter, as they called it, which we now call an opposition. The diameter might make more sense. The sextile, the square, and the trine, which they called the diameter, the hexagon, the square, and the triangle. Polarity. All right, so 2 times 6 equals 12. It shows itself in a couple ways. The sextile, yeah? 60 degrees. So skip a sign from Aries to Gemini. Gemini to Leo, etc. And what we'll see, you know, what I'm showing here is that sextiles have the same polarity, like Aries and Gemini are both blade signs. I'd really use that term today instead of traditionally we'll say masculine, or some say positive, which is like a whole trip. But I'm gonna talk about blade and chalice. Okay, so chalice. Actually, no, let's do this. We'll work with that circle. I'm gonna say outward signs and inward signs. All right, so take that for what you will. All right, so Aries, Gemini, Gemini, Leo, Leo, Libra, right? Outward signs, air and fire signs. So sextiles have the same polarity, just like the oppositions, same polarity. They both have different elements. And they differ in modality. The sextile signs have different modalities, and the oppositions have the same modalities, right? So in a way, the 12-sign zodiac is really like 6 polarity pairs, yeah? And here we see that opposition, right? We apply a little bit of that number magic, right? So from Aries to Libra, I have to go 6 signs, right? We know Libra is the 7th sign from Aries, but I go Aries, Taurus, Gemini, Cancer, Leo, Virgo, Libra. I have to move 6 signs from Aries to get to Libra, the opposition or the diameter. And 6 signs divided by 12 signs is half of the circle, right? The diameter. Well, in the sextiles, I either go from Aries to Gemini, right, ahead in the zodiacal order, and that's 2/12 or 1/6, or I can go reverse, retrograde in the zodiacal order and get to Aquarius. It's 10/12 if I move actually all the way ahead in the zodiacal order. Aquarius is 10 signs ahead of Aries, and 10/12 is 5/6. Right? So 6s and 2s. This is the game of sextiles and oppositions. Oppositions, you know, really, and this is a wonderful contemplation forever for we astrologers, us astrologers. It's, you know, what is the one thing, in this case, that Aries and Libra are the two sides of? What is the one thing that Gemini and Sagittarius are the two sides of? Aries and Libra, you put them together, it spells libraries. I'm always fascinated by that. This is the book of relating, right? Aries, selfness, not selfish, selfness. Libra, othership. And we need both to meet in the middle way of right relating. All right. So let's see the opposition on a keyboard. And we'll go from Cancer because I have the keyboard set that way. And it's called the tritone. All right. I'm going to play the octave, Cancer to Cancer. And if I cut that in half, Capricorn. C and F sharp. Now I just used the same term in two ways. I don't mean cut that in half like playing halfway down the string. That will actually take me to the octave. This is taking an octave of frequency and finding the very middle point of that frequency. Just like we can take the zodiac and find the very middle point from a starting place, and we will find the opposite sign, the polarity point. Yeah. And the tritone, it's rumored, was called the devil's chord by church and was disallowed from harmonic usage for a couple hundred years. Some deny that that thing's true at all. I'll play a different one. This is Sagittarius and Gemini. I mean, it's a heavy sound. You may know that traditionally the opposition was known as the Saturnian aspect, right? And we can feel it in our body. It's tricky. All right, the other side of polarity is 2 6s. All right, so the inner signs and the outer signs. These two different hexagrams. It's an interesting thing to think of them as a sine wave. If you play with the way of 7 rays, I'm not going to get into too much right now of like which signs can see one another. It's only signs of the same polarity see one another, except for the square. So if we think of it as a sine wave, you know, alternating current, positive and negative current, you know, it's a tricky thing that's what was said about the signs, and people have really released that terminology because the idea is that the masculine signs are positive and the feminine signs are negative, and we take that term to mean bad or less than negative, right? Well, think about electricity. Negative is grounded, right? Negative is actually the one that keeps you from getting fried. It's the one that's in the body and down and connected to the earth. You know what I'm saying? So it's a kind of great thing. And then it makes a lot of sense for the inner sign. I'm going to speak more inner and outer, right? So inner, the silver petals here, and outer, the gold petals. And if I take this kind of idea of an alternating sine wave, I've got to connect the Aries and the Pisces cusp there, right? And so I turn it into a circle, I'll flatten it out, and that's going to look like this. Right, so we have our original circle, and then we have a circle of 6 outside and a circle of 6 inside. And it's really interesting to look at these Ptolemaic aspects and to say, well, Aries, the only inner circle signs on this map that Aries is said to see traditionally are Capricorn and Cancer, the ones that are on the square. And so why is that, right? So this is this idea of polarity. This is an image I came across when I was first working on these things. And it's like, you know, a Nobel Award-winning scientist, Dave Rowley, who sorted this out in the quantum physics realm about the path of electrons around the nucleus. And there's these different models, you know, and it's basically like particle wave duality. So I think it's really important for us not to think of, though duality very much, and polarity is a much better word for it, is one of the principles of the universe. Let's just leave it there. All right. So musically, these sound like what are called whole tone scales. And there's only 2 of them. I could do this all the way up and down the keyboard forever, or this all the way up and down and up the keyboard forever. Sextile, separated by whole steps. So it sounds like. any sound, right? Or I can go to the anyway, there's only two whole tone scales, just like there's only two regular hexagons that map the polarities of the astrological zodiac, right? So we look again at these polarity aspects, the sextile and the opposition, and shown here in blue and green, because the blue representing in this case so-called easy aspects and the red so-called hard aspects. I prefer the terms flowing and activating personally. I feel a lot of magic in the so-called hard aspects personally. So, I mean, why is it that sextiles are said to be good and oppositions are said to be bad by not great astrologers? Like, what's up with that? And we look at the difference here in just this map. Well, they both share polarity, both the sextile and opposition in signs. They're the same polarity as one another, and they're both different in element. And where they differ is that the sextile has a different element, like Aries and Gemini, fire and air, whereas the opposition has different modality. They're both different in element, different modality. So Aries, cardinal, Gemini, mutable. In the opposition, the same modality, right? Aries, cardinal, Libra, cardinal. So why does same modality signs have a bad rap? This weird thing happening where I see the ghost of the last slide on the current slide. So I'm going to zoom around like that a little bit. This is something that Anna created with me that really just blew my mind. And so what I'm looking here is the 7 rays from Aries, the 2 sextiles, squares, trines, and the opposition. And then I'm basically completing geometry. So you'll see that line vertically from Sagittarius to Leo, or Leo to Sagittarius, that completes the grand fire trine with Aries, right? You'll see that we go from Aries to Capricorn to Libra to Cancer, and we see now the cardinal square, often called the cross, but because we could draw on the opposition from Cancer to Capricorn in that case as well. And then you'll see the grand sextile, right? If I just run sextiles all the way around from Aries to Gemini to Leo to Libra to Sag to Aquarius, and it fascinates me that the opposition or the polarity point, in this case Libra to Aries, is required to complete both the grand square and the grand sextile, right? So there's this polarity share, and again, like what makes the sextile flowing and the opposition activating? Is it this difference in modality? Because, or sorry, the same modality for the opposition? I mean, perhaps, because we know that it's also true in quadruplicity, true for the squares, right? So squares, same modality, just like the opposition. Different element, just like the opposition. But unlike the opposition, also different in polarity. So the only thing squares share is modality. And traditionally, they're known as the Martian aspect. All right, so look at this. Let's look at the squares from Aries to Cancer. We go 3 of 12 signs, and 3 divided by 12 is 1/4. Or I could go 9 of 12 signs to get to Capricorn. That's 3/4, right? So you notice that these Ptolemaic aspects reduce the sextiles and the oppositions to halves and sixths, and the squares to fourths. We call this quadruplicity, right? Cardinal signs, fixed signs, mutable signs, they tend to be called in our day. And I'm just going to play one of them for you. This is, in music, what we call a diminished seventh. All right, so. So again, I can run this all the way up the keyboard or all the way down the keyboard forever. I'm saying keyboard, but I could say vibration, frequency, harmony forever. It's an endless thing. Let me play them for you because I can't really on saxophone, right? I can what we call arpeggiate or play these chords one note at a time. But I can't play the chord, right? In the keyboard I can. And so play this for you. All right. Pretty heavy, right? It's like, you know, in the Western movie being tied to the train tracks. Let me just play. Here's a square. We add another square on top of that to make the T square. And here's the full on grand square. And there's only 3 types of diminished sevenths that can run all the way up and down frequency forever. Just like there's only 3 types of modalities. Linda, I'm seeing I'm about 70 minutes in. No need to reply. I'll probably have another 15 minutes, I think, before question. All right, so quadruplicity, which today we typically call elements, right? So we can now take these squares or these triangles, right, and connect the signs of the same element. So trines are the same polarity, same element, but different modality. It seems to be same modality gets the hard aspect, and different modality gets the easy aspect, wrap. What's up with that? Why are elements favored, if you consider that? All right, so from Aries to Leo, we go ahead 4 signs of the 12, which is a third, or we can get to Sagittarius, 8 signs of the 12, 2/3. Triangles, right? Fire, earth, air, and water. And here's the water signs on the keyboard in my map from Cancer at sea. This is called an augmented triad. It's a major, which is a trine. And then you add the next major. And I can go from there, a major third up. And I'm at the octave where I started. So that will run forever in every direction. Now, first of all, you know, here's this diminished 7th chord or a grand cross, all right? I mean, we would expect a grand cross to sound rough, yeah? But here's the grand trine. It sounds pretty rough too, doesn't it? I mean, it's too open. This is the grand water trine all the way up for these many notes. You can go for in both directions forever. And there are only 4 augmented triads that will do this in the keyboard all the way up. And that's the 4 elements. All right, so this brings me to this thing. We're kind of getting to the wrap up here, but you know, if what I really just tripped on is like, if this thing's real, well, why does the grand trine like it doesn't sound settled to me? And you know, we're looking at sheet music here again. I know that's not for everyone, but I'll play these first, okay? So here's a major, what we call the major triad. And if I'm talking here, they're shown in the key of C. So that's all white keys. And basically, we're going 1, and we're skipping notes. So diatonically speaking, it's going from the 1st to the 3rd to the 5th. And then that's called a major triad. And you can just hear it, right? Happy. Missed. That was actually me going from minor to major. But I'll play this sheet here. This is the C major triad. Here's the C minor triad. And you can feel that in your body. And we know these sounds. Major, minor. Okay, so back to major. And I'll go to the 3rd one shown here, augmented. Okay, and this is the grand trine. So here's major. Here's augmented. Again, it's just like too open for me anyway. Now I'm going to go from minor to diminished. So the minor, I go from major and I make the third flat. Major, minor. And for the diminished, I flat the fifth as well. I want to just show you those real quick. I don't know if they'll show up anyway. Maybe we'll do that later. If you want to ask questions about that, ask. But you know what's really fascinating to me when I map the astrology like this, it's like, okay, this major triad versus the minor triad. And these are the sounds that, you know, we really use most as musicians. It's not like all squares or all trines. All trines is this augmented situation. All squares is the diminished one. The major is built of a major third, which is a trine, and a minor third, which is a square. So major triads in this map are made of a trine and a square. And we say happy. And the minor triad made of a square and a trine. Okay, so build the major. There's the trine. And then that's the square. Or I'll build the minor, a square, and then a trine. And there's such a deep teaching in that for me. You know, it's like when we build these harmonies and we set up this tension in order to resolve. This is how we work musically, to make beauty, you know? You don't want a song that has no tension. You don't want a chart that has no tension. And I just love so much that the major and the minor, the so-called like happy and sad, are made of the same things, just in a different order. And they're not all trine for happy and all square for sad. Astrology is doing too much of that, in my humble opinion. Maybe not too humble. But for me, you know, we want to work with flowing aspects and activating aspects in balance, in harmony, and see how they flow and work with one another. That's what I've been after astrologically in the last many months. All right. So this map here shows the Ptolemaic aspects of the major aspects on a grid, right? So we have Aries to Pisces on the columns and on the rows. And of course, the middle diagonal then is all the conjunctions. It's just Aries, Aries, Taurus, Taurus, etc., right? And then you'll just see this beautiful geometry. But what you're also seeing is all these darked out panels. Well, those are what we're called the in-conjuncts, the blind spots, the aversions. They're the semi-sextiles and the quincunxes. Okay, so here we have, right, conjunction, sextile, square, trine, opposition, showing what they share and what they don't share. Well, when we look at the semi-sextile, right, from Aries to Taurus, one sign at a 12, notice that doesn't reduce. Neither does 11 twelfths all the way to Pisces. Those are the two semi-sextiles. The Virgo, 5 twelfths. Scorpio, 7 twelfths from Aries. They also don't reduce. They're just twelfths, right? We saw the trines reduced to thirds and the squares reduced to fours and the polarities either to halves or sixths, right? Oppositions and sextiles respectively. Well, these ones don't reduce, so maybe there's something there, right? And this, by the way, I mean, just look at that image. That's the glyph that we use for semi-sextiles in quincunxes. So these two aspects are relationships between whole signs. They share nothing in common, right? So they're different in polarity, they're different in element, and they're different in modality, right? So we'll just do one. I'll say Aries, outward, cardinal, fire, Taurus, inward, fixed, earth. Virgo, inward, mutable earth. Scorpio, inward, fixed water. Pisces, inward, mutable water. This is typically how we teach this in astrology. They share nothing in common with Aries. You know what? Nothing in common with Libra either. And, you know, maybe it's the reason why we assign such baggage to the 12th and the 8th and the 6th houses traditionally, right? Hidden enemies, death, illness. How did the second house get off the hook? Well, traditionally it doesn't so much, but I'll say this just like from Aries to Pisces anyway. There's contra antitia from Aries to Virgo. There's antitia from Aries and Scorpio. They're called like and girding. These are old terms that some of you have heard, some of you haven't. look them up. Aries, Taurus, in some senses, is the only one of these in-conjuncts that is not alleviated through one of these special conditions of antitia, contra antitia, and so-called signs that agree on the path or share a traditional ruler. And this shape is so amazing. I'm going to get back to these shapes really quickly first, though, because a semi-sextile, right, I have to draw all the way through each of the 12 signs to get back to where I started. I mean, the opposition, I'm just there and back. The trine takes me a triangle. The square, obviously, is square, and the sextile is sextile. But the dodecagon is the long way around. I got to draw 12 lines. The quincunx is the longest way around, right? I have to draw 12 lines as well and make the 12-pointed star, the dodecagram. But it takes me, like, I'm literally going to pass go 11 times, because just as I showed earlier, musically, it takes 5 of these, or it takes 7 times through the circle of fifths. Wait a second. I'm going to get back to that because I don't want to say it wrong. So anyway, this is called the mystic rectangle. And let's just explore them musically one more time. Getting close to the edge here. So semi-sextiles, right? I played this earlier. It's just neighboring signs. So I'll play Aries and Taurus. I mean, it's another planet. It's like a totally different dimension. And it's one of the ways that I've come to think of the inner and the outer signs and work with them more, trying to tap into like a 3-dimensional view, or maybe even higher dimensional view. And that's too long of a tale for now. We'll see kind of one image of that. What is the zodiac? Great question. But so this sounds pretty dang tense, right? Aries, Taurus. Here's Aries, Pisces. Okay, so we can get why in this map that would be an inversion. But this one just doesn't quite register. Here's Aries, Virgo. Put it down here, it'd be more pleasant. Aries, Scorpio. I mean, where have you heard that in music before? And I'm not going to get here technically musically, but if I play what's called the 1, 4, and 5 chords, okay, then I'm going to hear things like this. Where's a good place to play this? Where have you heard that? Have you ever been to church? You ever listened to the blues or rock and roll? I mean, we build so many songs out of what's called the 1, 4, and 5 because these are the chords that are most related. And this is what's really tripping me out about the quincunx. You know, I can go and I play a lot of free music with people, right? Where we're you know, there's just nothing written. There's, you know, no conversation. We just start playing music and see what happens. And sometimes it's wonderful, sometimes not. But, you know, it's tricky when we're playing in a key. The music's never great if it just gets stuck in one key. And so, you know, somebody will change keys and then it's up to the rest of the group to hear it and make it happen. It's a really important lesson that I applied to myself astrologically, by the way. Like, I can learn how to like read music and all this theory and stuff, which I never knew really, but it won't matter too much when the horn's out of the case and I'm just trying to play with some cats. You know, later it really does. But we also have to work on the ear, work on the feel, work on the heart and the soul. And we want to do that in astrology, right? We don't want to do this all by the book. And so we want to study with our teachers and study, you know, for me, I like studying many different paradigms and find my own way through there and grab things from the sky and from the music and whatever, yeah? But we want to make sure that in all the science that we're developing, that we're also leading with the heart, as far as I'm concerned, you know, and this really happens musically. Like, you learn to play with your ear, then bring in the theory and, you know, miracles start happening. So anyway, that's my route in astrology. So now to bring this back to this idea, well, these notes, you know, here's the semi-sextile. I mean, it's Jaws, you know, but these quincunxes. So what's the issue? Well, if I'm playing in the key of, let's say, C with somebody or Cancer, and they go to the key of G, Aquarius, that's the quincunx, okay? It's harder for me to recognize that anything has changed because those keys are so similar. And that's really interesting to me because in the tradition, in the old writings in astrology, these blind spots of quincunxes anyway seem to correlate to human biology. All right, so for the neighboring signs, for the semi-sextiles, they're just right here. I'll go back to that image, right? Like if somebody's sitting next to you and they're holding up 3 fingers and say, how many fingers am I holding up? It's not like you're gonna see them, right? So, but now what if you get it right? And what if they then go to 5 and you say 5 and you're like 4, 2, and you get it cold? What is happening? You're doing something extra sensory, right? And that's my angle with exploring these in-conjuncts. There's superpowers there. There's a reason why we call this thing the mystic rectangle. This is kind of harder to say. I mean, person sitting right there, I can totally see them. But we have what's called a lacuna in our vision. We have blind spots. So if you do this, there's really wonderful tests online where you can see something disappear when you close one eye and something else disappear when you close the other eye. Because the human optic nerve intersects the eyeball at 150 degrees, the quincunx, we have blind spots at 150 degrees. The quincunx. You know, but most of us have stereoscopic vision, and it kind of cancels that particular blind spot out. Now, given the association of one eye with a blade and another eye with a chalice, in medical astrology, it's kind of interesting to think that it's that, you know, seeing through both polarities that allows us to not have blind spots in this regard. But I'm really interested in working in charts now with this idea of blind spots and seeing the beauty and the harmony and the agreement, especially of quincunxes, and tying them together. All right, so this is what I was reaching before, and I was about to say it wrong, maybe did. 12 musical fifths is 7 octaves. So when we draw the dodecagon, the 12-pointed star, say from Aries to Scorpio to Gemini to Capricorn to Leo, whatever, right? That's the musical fifths, or the fourths would be Aries to Virgo to Aquarius to Cancer, etc. It's going to take, if we go in the 5th route, it's going to take us 7 octaves or 7 passings of Aries to get back to Aries. If we start there, Aries, Scorpio, Gemini, Capricorn, Leo, Pisces, Libra, Taurus, Sagittarius, Cancer, Aquarius, Virgo, back to Aries. We passed Aries 7 times. Sort that out on your own. I guarantee you something will blow up in a good way in your mind. It's been a really wonderful thing to play with. But we see the 12, the 5, the 7 coming together. What's 5 plus 7? 12. 7 white keys and 5 black keys and a musical octave in the keyboard. These like mystical numbers are tripping me out. And I hope that, if nothing else, I've done that for you today. All right. So in wrapping up, there's something about this spiral of life, which in a way is mathematically incorrect, but is it? And I will say it is not from the perspective of the curve, or that we cannot step in the same river twice. Though it doesn't sound good in a static scene, and that's a long story for another time. But there's something here that's helping me get after what the zodiac actually is. There's something in seeing this crazy gift of music in Taurus. And so, and toroid, right? The torus shape. Because I'm seeing in this, I'm seeing grand squares and grand trines and the grand sextile. And other things, because I see now the signs and the keys correlated. But basically what I'm seeing is this. And I am sure that this is what our zodiac is, that it's not some static circle. And that's a very long story for another time that I don't yet have the words to express. And maybe I never will, but where words fail, music does not. So again, I hope you have enjoyed this strange inside approach to astrology today, and hopefully, as I love to say, may it have confirmed things you have always known and opened new windows of contemplation, practice, and play, and in true Gemini fashion, brought more questions than answers. I want to thank Anna Zaharia for helping me create a lot of these illustrations, which helped me see some magic that I was never taught about astrology, and how imperative and beautiful these mystic rectangles are, and what I've come to call magic squares, which is a long story for another time, magic mirrors. I will say, for a plug, it's the nature of the presentation that I'll be giving at the Great Lakes Astrology Conference in July, end of June, beginning of July 2019. And I'll be doing a post-conference workshop there, all-day workshop, about lensing superpowers that we don't usually look at in our birth charts by addressing these so-called blind spots and seeing how other planets of our chart alleviate the aversion. So if you're near the Midwest, and especially if you're not, come out, make new friends. I hope you'll come to the conference. You can find all the things that I do at morethan-astrology.com. My website /events will get you to the events page. Needs an update. But one thing that you will see there is this retreat that's coming up very soon. We have a few spaces left. Very end of January through February, we'll be celebrating the triple Sagittarian conjunction of Moon, Venus, and Jupiter in the morning sky, brightest beings. Well, I'm sure Maurice will have us in the morning doing some Kundalini, and I'll be leading sky gazing at night. Onur Doser, an amazing traditional astrologer, is coming over from Turkey. Nadia Shah and Ursula Stockter will be participating, and we'll go to the Pyramid of the Magician in Uxmal on the Yucatan Peninsula, Mayan pyramid. It's an amazingly powerful site. But we'll spend most of our time at this private island, which is like a flamingo preserve, eating good food and learning a lot of astrology. So check it out. You can go to morethan-astrology.com/events, grab one of the last places that is still available, and I hope to see you in Mexico. I think with our node shifting Cancer, Capricorn, we're all starting to feel more and more the pull of doing this thing, not only in this wonderful Aquarian worldwide webbish way, but also connecting heart to heart in person. So go to these astrology retreats, come to this one, but go to every one you have the opportunity to, because it's so nice to remember that, yeah, we're weird, but there's other people like us, and that's the people we want to hang with, So again, thanks for hearing the aspects with me today. I'm definitely open to hearing a few questions if you guys have any of them. And I really appreciate the opportunity to be here once again at EA Zoom meetings. It's always a treat. Thank you for joining me.
Wonderful, Gemini. Thank you so much. That was absolutely incredible.
Thank you.
Any questions from our audience?
Does anyone just want to sing something? I'm seeing a lot of familiar names here as I scroll through too. Good to see you, friends.
I have a quick question. Have you compared your system to the actual planet sound recordings from NASA?
Well, again, for me, the planets are more like instruments than they are notes. And I haven't done so much of, I've tripped out to those recordings. They're crazy, right? And just like wondered even like how we get them and all that. They're really cool. But it's like, in a sense, I shouldn't say it's apples and oranges. Well, I should, because they're both fruit, but it's a different realm. I haven't fitted in here yet. I haven't seen planets specifically as notes, which some do, as I shared. My friend Ezra does that, and then he can build these whole chords. And I'll just say, check out that book, Astro-Music, music with a K. Ezra, using his chromatic map where he starts with A at Aries at C, he's looked at a lot of different like famous recordings over time and then compared them to the actual chart of the moment of the recording and shown some amazing correlations. It's a very cool mystical book. Also, if you're looking for a new like mind expanding read, check it out.
Okay, any final questions before we wind down?
Just a comment.
Go ahead.
As always, Brett, I say, wow. Then thank you. Awesome, totally awesome.
Thank you so much. Really a treat to have you here. And yeah, so friends, I hope, there's keyboards you can play with online for free, and map your chart and play some of the trickier aspects. And You know, look at how, let's say you have Venus square Mars, and that's a thing that's always tripped you out or whatever, you know. Listen to it, play it, you know. And then, or I'll just give a musical example. Let's say there's something in Pisces and something in Aries, and it's got that. And what's funny is we just kind of ignore that. Typically, as astrologers, not too many people are working with the semi-sextile unless it's really strong, you know. But traditionally, that's like a thing. Especially, let's say Mars is in Pisces and Jupiter's in Aries. From a traditional standpoint, where traditionally, and I'm not just a traditional astrologer, I don't mean to get that point across, but traditionally Jupiter is associated with Pisces, right? And Mars with Aries. And so they're in each other's sign. And we often think of that as a mutual reception. But traditionally, there's no reception between these in-conjunct signs. So that's kind of an issue where these planets are living in each other's realms, but they can't access the teachings of the one who speaks the language of the sign in which they reside. But you'll find other planets in your chart that can see them both. And so, you know, musically, it might sound something like, it's not like this abrasive tension goes away, but we bring something else into the mix, and suddenly it's interesting. It's not only tolerable, but it's like interesting, you know? And so the music map has helped me approach my own chart and charts with clients and sessions, because, you know, I should, I guess, always say this, that's one of the things I love to do. So you can book a session at morethan-astrology.com if you're interested. We can actually play with the keyboard. I usually do in sessions now. But it's really helped me like approach aspects in a different way and looking more for shapes and geometries and how these different relationships are, because as we know so often, everything is relationship, and you bring a third person into, you know, a two, things get really interesting really quickly, right? And seeing our chart in that way, and then in groups of 4s and 5s and 6s and back to 2s and 3s, it's like changing my astrology. And so, you know, may our astrology always change. So hopefully this is a tool that will freak you out as much as it has me.
Okay, thank you so much. Would you all please thank Gemini Brett?
Thanks, Gemini.
Thank you.
Thank you, Gemini.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
All right, friends, great to see so many familiar faces and some new ones. See you on Earth sometime soon. I hope. Come to Mexico.